Conversational analysis. The use of language, like most forms of social behavior, is governed by social rules. Some rules are designed to protect people's feelings by showing respect. For example, whether you use a title or a first name in addressing someone. Other rules are designed to protect the integrity of the English language. If people were to decide to tell lies in some random way, listeners would have no way of determining when speakers were lying and when they were telling the truth. Language would cease to be of value to us. To prevent this from happening, society has settled on a set of conventions governing language use that preserves its integrity by requiring us to be honest in language use, have evidence for what we say, and make what we say relevant to the speech content. These rules were never voted on by government, nor were they ever officially recognized anywhere. We learn these rules much the same way we learn most social rules, by trial and error. A philosopher named H.P. Grice formulated a cooperative principle which he believed underlies language use. This principle states that two people in a conversation will mutually cooperate. The cooperation principle ensures or requires that we make sure that what we say in conversation furthers the purposes of these conversations. Note the following situations. In the following conversation with Kim, Sandy, Gail, and Mike, there really is no cooperation going on here. Kim says, "How are you?" Sandy says, "Oh, Harrisburg is the capital of Pennsylvania." Gail says, "Really? I thought the weather would be warmer." Then Mike says, "Well, in my opinion, the soup could have used a little more salt." So there doesn't seem to be any cooperation going on in this. This is not a conversation. This is simply four people speaking random sentences which do not connect to the purpose of the conversation. Kim is the one in charge when she starts and says, "How are you?" The expected response would be, "I'm fine," "I'm not fine," and then we go on from there. But that's not what happened here. Grice went on to argue that there are some conversational rules or maxims that regulate conversation by making us comply with the cooperative principle. Note the first of three rules to be discussed in this linguistic course. Maxim of quality. 1. Do not say what you believe to be false. 2. Do not say that for which you lack adequate evidence. The first one is simple, don't lie. The second rule is more interesting, for it is only when we believe we have adequate evidence for some claim that we have much confidence that we are observing the first maxim of quality. Nevertheless, people differ strikingly in what they think is good evidence for their views, especially in religion and politics, which is why these topics are so often off limits as topics of conversation. In language, we may normally assume that speakers are obeying the cooperative principle. Because of this assumption, we sometimes draw inferences from what people say. Note the following conversation. Read the following conversation involving Laura and Amanda from the Glass Menagerie, Tennessee Williams, 1949. So Laura says, "I don't believe any men are coming to visit today, Mother." Amanda says, "What? Not one? You must be joking. Not one man? It can't be true. There must be a flood. There must have been a tornado." The literal interpretation here is not true, but despite this fact, Amanda is still following the cooperative principle. It is obvious to Laura that Amanda's use of the word flood and tornado are intentional exaggerations which overstate the severity of the situation. The inference that Laura draws from Amanda's statement is one of foolishness and cruelty. Amanda is afraid that no man will ever come to visit her daughter. She ultimately fears that she will be left with the responsibility to care for her daughter. Grice's Maxim of Relation. This rule says that you must be relevant in the conversation. This rule is central to the orderliness of conversation. It limits random topic shifts like the one below. A. How are you today? B says Florida is having a recession this year. C, really? I thought the Bruins would win that basketball game. D, well, I hope we don't have an earthquake. So in this case, there's not really any inferences that we can draw because the speakers are not cooperating. They're not furthering the purposes of the conversation. The most important reason I mention this maxim of relation or relevance is that understanding how we draw conversational inferences is important. An inference is when a speaker passes from one proposition, statement, or judgment considered as true to another whose truth is believed to follow that of the former. For example, let's say that Speaker A has knowledge or reason to believe that Speaker C is dating someone. Speaker A has knowledge that Speaker B can probably answer Speaker A's question. Speaker A is Sandy, Speaker B is Tom, and person C is Gail. Is Gail dating anyone these days? Well, she goes to Cleveland every weekend. In this case, Sandy will likely draw the inference that Gail is dating someone because she will assume that what Tom has said is relevant to what she has said. In fact, if Tom knew that Gail goes to Cleveland every weekend because she has a job there, what she said would have been very misleading. Here's a violation of what Grice would say is a violation of the maxim of relation. Notice how what John says doesn't directly answer the mother's question. So the mother says, who took the cookies? The son says, I saw John running out of the house in a hurry. So what can be inferred about John? The maxim of relation is violated, and the mother assumes that what the son is saying relates to her question of who took the cookies. Therefore, the mother will likely draw the inference that John took the cookies, even though the son does not say so directly. Now, it's quite possible later on that the son could change what he said, and the mother could go to the son and say, hey, you lied to me. You told me that John took the cookies. The son could easily say, no, I didn't. I said he was running out of the house in a hurry. He was going to baseball practice. So that's the talking point that the son could use, and he could cancel what he said at a later date. And that's one of the characteristics of what we call implicatures. An implicature is an implied statement here, and it can be canceled at a later date. You can change the talking point or the truth of what you think you meant. It kind of possibly has a double meaning to it. The third maxim is Grice's maxim of quantity. Make your contribution as informative as is required. Do not make your contribution more informative than is required. So don't give too much information, or don't not give enough. So give enough information to further the purposes of the conversation. So note the first conversation. You have A, how are you today? B says, I'm fine, thank you. That's a normal response. Or how are you today? And then B says, well, my car is not working too well right now. To tell you the truth, I don't have very much money. In fact, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills this month. So what's the difference between these two conversations? So hint, B. Could B be asking A for something? Maybe because B is giving too much information here. This is probably not what A expects. It's not the expected response. It's TMI, right? So A will likely infer that maybe B's asking for some money. Could you give me a loan until my next paycheck? That might be the inference drawn here.